He left as a soldier, serving his country with honor. But when Quentin Ralston came home from deployment, he didn't return to parades or a warm welcome. He returned to strangers living in his family's ranch, a place that had been in his bloodline for generations. Gone, sold without his consent. Not by the bank, not by the state, but by his own homeowners association. And beneath the surface of this betrayal was something far uglier, something rooted in power, greed, and prejudice. How could a man fight for freedom overseas, only to be stripped of his own back home? But Quentin's nightmare was only beginning. For Quentin Ralston, home had always been more than just land. It was legacy. His family's ranch stretched under the wide Texas sky, a place where his father taught him how to mend fences, ride horses, and respect the soil beneath his boots. Every inch of it carried memories, from childhood summers chasing fireflies to evenings spent listening to his father's stories on the porch swing. When duty called, Quentin left it all behind to serve. 11 long months overseas, dust, sweat, orders shouted across foreign soil. He had survived danger and distance with one thought keeping him steady: the promise of coming back to that ranch, to the roots that grounded him. But the world he imagined returning to was about to be shattered. Something had changed while he was gone, something that would test not only his strength, but his very right to belong. He thought the fight was overseas. He didn't know it was waiting for him at home. The sun hung low as Quentin's truck rumbled down the familiar Texas back roads, his uniform still creased from travel, his duffel riding shotgun. Every mile closer to the ranch felt like peeling back the weight of deployment, until the moment his tires crunched over gravel and his chest went cold. A minivan sat where his Chevy usually parked. Children's bikes leaned against the fence. Through the window, curtains he had never seen swayed in the breeze. For a second, he thought exhaustion was playing tricks. But then he saw them, strangers moving inside his family's home. Toys scattered across the floor. A woman with a toddler on her hip staring back at him like he was the intruder. "This is my house," Quentin said, his voice steady but his gut twisting. Her reply landed like a blow. "We bought this place." From the HOA. The words cut deeper than any wound he had faced overseas. He had left everything in order before deployment, mortgage paid, taxes cleared. He had fought to protect his country, yet in his absence, someone had stripped away the very land his father had bled to keep. It didn't take long for a name to rise to the surface: Sylvia Brenner, the iron-fisted president of the HOA, a woman who wielded rules like weapons, notorious for nitpicking lawns, mailboxes, and parking spaces. But this was different. This was theft. Quentin's anger simmered as he drove to the gas station on the edge of town, his hands trembling on the wheel. He dialed an old friend, Luis Navarro, a sheriff's deputy who'd grown up 2 miles down the road. Luis didn't hesitate. "Don't confront her yet," he warned. "If Brenner's behind this, it's bigger than just you." And he was right. The deeper Quentin dug, the uglier it became. Paperwork filed with the county, showing his ranch sold under delinquent dues. His signature nowhere to be found. Receipts proving every bill had been paid. And worse, stories trickling in from other families. Franklin Ortega, a mechanic who lost his home after being slapped with $10,000 in bogus fees. The Holbrooks, retired teachers, evicted over violations that never existed. It wasn't incompetence. It was a pattern. A machine built to chew people up, families with fewer resources, minorities less. Likely to fight back, soldiers too far away to defend themselves. Sylvia and her board were running a racket, hiding behind the law, confident no one would dare challenge them. But Quentin wasn't like the others. He had the law on his side, federal protections meant to shield service members while deployed. And he had something Sylvia never expected, the determination of a soldier who'd stared down enemies in combat and survived. Still, Sylvia wasn't shaken. When Quentin showed up at the HOA office in uniform, demanding answers, she met him with a thin smile. "Correction," she told him. "The HOA sold it. You abandoned the property. The board had no choice." Her tone was calm, her posture unflinching, as if she believed her own lies. Quentin saw through it, and he saw something else, confidence. Too much confidence. She wasn't acting like someone caught in a mistake. She was acting like someone who had done this before, and gotten away with it. By the time Quentin left that office, the truth was clear. This fight was bigger than his ranch. It was about every family Sylvia had steamrolled, every voice she had silenced, every life she had uprooted under the guise of community standards. He wasn't just battling for land. He was battling for justice. But what Quentin didn't know yet was that Sylvia wasn't about to roll over. She had power, connections, and a board willing to protect her at any cost. And she was ready to fight back. Because if Quentin thought reclaiming his home was the hardest part, he was about to find out the war had only just begun. The courtroom was packed, every seat filled, every eye fixed on Quentin. Veterans in uniform lined the back wall, arms folded in silent solidarity. Families who had lost their homes whispered prayers, clutching worn documents, their proof of lives dismantled by the HOA's lies. But on the other side sat Sylvia Brenner, calm as stone, pearls at her neck, her lawyers flanking her like bodyguards. She carried herself not as a woman accused, but as one certain she would walk away untouched. Quentin's pulse thundered in his ears as the county judge called the case. He wasn't just fighting for his ranch anymore. He was standing for every voice silenced, every family broken by greed dressed up as community rules. Then came the blow. Sylvia's attorney rose, waving a stack of papers. "Your Honor, here is the signed forfeiture agreement," he declared. The crowd stirred. Quentin's stomach twisted as he scanned the page projected onto the screen. There it was, his name, his signature, clear, undeniable, except it wasn't his. Quentin stood, his voice cracking through the heavy air. "That's a forgery. I never signed that. I was serving overseas when that date was written." His words hung, but the judge's eyes narrowed. Doubt crept in. Sylvia leaned back, a smile ghosting her lips as if victory was already hers. And then, Luis Navarro, his childhood friend, strode forward with a folder clutched in his hand. He had spent nights digging, searching through county records, calling in favors. "Your Honor," he said firmly, placing the folder on the bench, "these aren't just mistakes. They're patterns. Look, 37 properties. All seized the same way. All signatures forged." Gasps rippled through the room. The judge flipped through the evidence, page after page of identical fraud. Quentin's chest heaved, rage and vindication colliding. For months, he had felt invisible, powerless, stripped of dignity, of the very ground beneath his feet. Now the truth was blazing in the open, undeniable. Sylvia's mask cracked. For the first time, her hands trembled as she reached for her glass of water. The pearl necklace no longer gleamed like armor. It looked like chains tightening around her throat. But just as Quentin felt the tide turn, Sylvia lashed back. Her voice cut through the uproar, sharp and venomous. "This man is unstable. A soldier with a temper, making wild accusations because he can't accept responsibility." She jabbed a finger toward Quentin. "Ask yourselves, would you trust a man like this in your neighborhood?" The words stung, heavy with the poison of prejudice. She wasn't just questioning his case, she was questioning his humanity. Quentin's fists clenched at his sides. He remembered the nights in desert tents, the weight of silence after comrades fell, the letters home where he promised his family he'd return stronger. He hadn't survived war to be broken here, in his own town, by lies and racism wrapped in authority. He stepped forward, steady, his voice low but unshakable. You call me unstable because I wore a uniform? Because I fought so you could sit here safe? You call me untrustworthy because of the color of my skin? Because I don't fit your picture of who deserves a home? Not today. Not anymore. The silence that followed was thunderous. Even the judge leaned back, eyes fixed on Quentin as though he too felt the weight of every word. For a breathless moment it seemed everything teetered. Truth on one side, corruption on the other. The outcome was no longer just about law, but about justice. About whether a man's service and sacrifice meant anything in the land he had defended. And as Sylvia's empire of lies began to crack, one question burned in everyone's mind. Would this be the day the system finally held her accountable? Or would power once again crush the truth beneath its boot? The courtroom didn't explode with cheers or rage. It simply fell into silence, the kind that carries more weight than words. The judge's gavel struck once, echoing through the chamber like a shot. Sylvia Brenner's case was no longer about a single ranch, it was about a system built on greed and racial exclusion. Her lawyers shuffled. The pearl necklace she once wore with pride now looked like a collar of shame. Quentin didn't get everything back that day. His ranch remained tangled in legal red tape, years of paperwork and appeals still ahead. But something shifted, irreversible, undeniable. The truth was no longer buried. The community saw it, the court recorded it, and Sylvia's mask of respectability was torn away. For Quentin, it wasn't victory in the way people imagined. It was survival. It was reclaiming dignity. He walked out of that courthouse not with land in his hands, but with his name cleared, his honor intact, and the knowledge that his fight had cracked open a wall too many had been crushed against. And that impact reached further than he could have known. Families who had been silent came forward, emboldened by his defiance. Reporters dug deeper, uncovering more stories of fraud and targeting. What began as one man's battle for a ranch became a mirror, forcing the town and the country to see how racism hides not only in words shouted in anger, but in contracts, policies, and the quiet theft of opportunity. Quentin returned to the land anyway. Even if the courts kept him waiting, he set foot on the soil his father once walked, reminding himself that no piece of paper, no corrupt official, could erase his family's legacy. He had faced war abroad, and now he had faced another kind of war at home. The scars from both would remain, but so would his resilience. Because his story wasn't just about a man and a ranch. It was about a nation still wrestling with its conscience, still deciding whose voices matter, whose homes are safe, and whose rights can be stripped away in the name of power. And so the question remains: how many more families must lose everything before justice stops being a privilege and finally becomes a promise?